Newcastle are closing in on a signing as Will Osula heads to Tyneside for a medical. We've got quotes from a manager of a potential target at St James's Park, and we'll look at Bruno influence as he makes a pretty emphatic statement on his future via social media. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to the Monday show. Thanks so much for all the support. Continuing with loads more subscribers. We're looking at nearly getting to 600, which is crazy considering I was aiming for 500 by the start of the season. We're also starting on some live shows. Did the first scheduled one on Wednesday and lots of people joined. Thanks so much for that. Then did a rather unscheduled breaking news reaction video live to the news about Will Osula and Mark Gay on Friday. Thanks so much to everyone who joined that one as well. There'll be another live on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, so please do join in there with lots of questions, lots of interactions. Really looking forward to getting to speak to you guys again about everything Newcastle United ahead of the Cellar Cup, which I will hopefully be at as well, at least one of the days, to bring you a video from St James's Park. But we're going to get straight into it this week with the first thing we're going to talk about. As I mentioned in the intro, Will Osula is heading to Tyneside for a medical from Sheffield United. A £15 million deal has been broadly agreed, 10 million with 5 million add-on. Fabrizio Romano is reporting that Osula's medical will happen this week, and he could even be in the squad, you would imagine, if things go well for one of the Cellar Cup days. If not, he will be hopefully unveiled to the crowd at St James's Park when Newcastle either face Brest or Girona at the weekend. Really, really good signing. If you want to check out how I feel about the signing overall, there's a short that I did from last week's Monday show where I sort of touched on him. I was pod bombed on Thursday's show. The news came a bit too late to cover it then, but I did do a deep dive on the live show that's also available to watch back as a video on the Friday. But also there's a short, as I say, from last week's Monday show when I talked a bit about why I think he'll suit Newcastle, why I think it's a good deal for Newcastle, for him coming in as a third option behind Wilson and Isak. The fact that he is kind of Premier League proven. I know he hasn't scored, but 21 games at his age, and the fact that it's his first full season at Sheffield United is big for him. It's big for the fact that he isn't a complete novice. He has obviously got a lot of quality. He's very tall, strong, great target man capabilities, but can also play out wide. Very good at running in behind as well. Sort of very similar to Isak in certain ways in the style of play, but I wouldn't say he's identical. I don't think he's quite as silky, and certainly not at the level of Isak. That's a lot of pressure to put on him, but you know what I'm trying to say. I think it's a really, really good signing, and the fact that he's coming in, I think initially there was a lot of negativity, and I can kind of understand why. It was not very much talked about in terms of transfers, and the fact that he isn't coming in to make an immediate stamp on the first team, and Newcastle do desperately need a centre-back and a right winger, which we'll obviously get into in a minute. But then the Mark Gay news broke just afterwards, and when I was talking on the live stream, there seemed to be a lot more positivity coming back from you guys than initially perhaps there was on Twitter. I know there's two different audiences there, but there seemed to be understanding the nuance of where Newcastle are with this signing, and the fact that it's a long-term investment, and if he's got the potential to work under Eddie Howe, it's a very Eddie Howe signing, similar to Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall, and Newcastle are really reaping the benefits of having those two in the squad this summer. After initial questions last summer about whether it was the right idea to sign them then, I think they've already shown this summer, particularly Lewis Hall, as I mentioned before, why they are in the squad and why they're going to make a big impact. Osula can have that down the line. The fact that he is another option, doesn't infringe too much on Wilson and Isak, is a big, big positive, particularly Isak. And getting a striker in, if you go and get Jonathan David, you kind of have to sell Wilson and then sell him the project and tell him he'll play. And that was always the negative in the conversation I was having with Steve Caldwell about Jonathan David. Just as an example, he's on the list of a player that Newcastle like, but it was always going to be difficult to sell him that project. You don't have to do that with Osula. There's a clear pathway that's been shown by Hall and Livramento. It works for him, it works for Newcastle. This is a very good sign. Then the conversation changed with Mark Gay, the bid, the talks that are going on. I stress that again, it's still just talks. It's still not enough to really go on to say he's their main target. They're still interested in Malik Thiaw as well, and the direction if it's an either or, the direction that they go in there with their centre back will directly impact how they go for the right midfielder towards the end of the window. And we all know that the right midfielder is absolutely paramount for Newcastle this season. It's still got the two options, Newcastle, Miguel Almiron and Jacob Murphy, that they had when the takeover happened on that right-hand side. That desperately needs to be amended, and I think Newcastle know that, but they're assessing different options, different price points. There's lots of moving parts that will come clearer in the next few weeks about where Newcastle are going to go. I think they've got more expensive and cheaper options in both right midfield and centre-back. Gay is a very, very proven Premier League centre-half. Obviously, played for England this summer and starred for England in the Euros this summer as well. I think he was their best player. He does tend to play on that left-hand side, so he would have to play across it when Spotman is fit, you would imagine. We will discuss more about these and get your thoughts on Wednesday's live show. The second thing I want to talk about is the quotes from Gary O'Neill at Wolves from last week that I missed on Thursday's show, where he sort of admitted that Wolves would be willing to deal on Pedro Neto at the right price. They're realistic about that situation. They valued him at around 60 million plus throughout the summer. Newcastle have been credited with an interest consistently. They've liked him. They've watched him a long time. Linked more prominently with Arsenal and Tottenham, but I think in both those cases they're more keen on strengthening with an out-and-out striker. You know, Arsenal have been linked with Alexander Isak, as we know. They've also been linked with Victor Osimhen and Victor Gyökeres. We've got Tottenham of Ange Postecoglou, who's talked about replacing Harry Kane finally. Neto doesn't really fit into that situation for those two clubs, whereas he perfectly slots in for Newcastle at the right price. And I think this is a deal that Newcastle will be certainly interested in, depending on the price. And obviously that depends on where it happens with Gay and Malik Thiaw and whatever happens at centre-half, because I think it's pretty clear to me, at least, that Newcastle can only go big on one position. If they go for Gay, it's highly unlikely that they'll be able to go for Neto as well. As I say, Neto is a player that, statistically, there are better players out there in terms of goal and game contributions, but the way he carries Wolves will obviously impress Eddie Howe, and obviously has impressed Eddie Howe. If you remember back to the game at Molineux last season, if he doesn't go off with a hamstring injury, Newcastle probably lose that game. The way he turned that game, the fact that though that he did come off kind of sums up the problem, doesn't it? That he's got injury problems. Newcastle have had a lot of that from last season. They don't want another player who's constantly dealing with injury issues. Anthony Gordon made a really good point in an interview with the Daily Mail last season that availability is the best ability. We've seen that with Bruno Guimaraes as well. Missed one game last season. You need players who are going to carry the team to be fit, and that's a problem for Pedro Neto. I did a video on him earlier in the summer where some people came back at me and said he isn't as good as I said he was. I think he actually is. Perhaps not in terms of the assists and the goals that he gets, because Wolves don't score that many goals. In the Newcastle team, I think those numbers would grow. But it's just his influence on the team and the way he's in the style of play and the directness that he brings, I think would absolutely suit Newcastle to the ground. But the fact that they're going for Gay, they're interested in other centre-halves, they're trying to figure out where they go. I think this one isn't likely to pick up at any time soon, but it's very interesting to know that Gary O'Neill is realistic on the situation and is admitting that there is a potential for Wolves to sell at the right price. They've, as I said, valued him at 60 million. If Newcastle could maybe come to the table for 40, 45, I could see it, because they are saving a bit of money on Osula up front as opposed to other more expensive striker options like Dominic Calvert-Lewin or Jonathan David. But this is a very, very difficult one to swing, I think, at this price if they're going to go for Gay. Let me know in the comment section below if you would like to go for Neto at a price of around 50, 45, 50 million, maybe. That might be doable because they're saving a bit of money on Osula, but do let me know in the comments what you think on these Neto rumours, the fact that Tottenham and Arsenal are interested but not quite suiting him as well. And then also on, we'll touch on this in the live stream on Wednesday as well. We'll look at what you want to do for the right midfielder now that the centre-back is becoming a little bit clearer, with Thiaw being a cheaper option and Gay being the more expensive option. And finally, we've got really great news from Bruno Guimaraes, who came back to captain Newcastle in defeat to Yokohama F. Marinos at the weekend. But it was great to see him back. He obviously made a massive impact in the early stages of the game, but as he said in his diary article, which appeared on the Newcastle website today, if you haven't read that, I really do suggest that you do, because it's really great insight and great to see Bruno having a bit of fun with that. The fact that he played and got his fitness up is really what matters. The fact that he's back and in the picture and captaining Newcastle is huge as well. He's clearly quite honoured to do that. But more pertinently, that post on social media that he put out on Twitter to suggest that he's looking forward to playing for Newcastle this season, amid all of that talk of Manchester City that's still going on, despite the fact that his release clause has been has expired. Still very, very keen to stay at Newcastle. He's still thinking about winning trophies at Newcastle. He talks like a fan, and he talks like he's really bought into the club in a way that we all know this, but it makes a massive difference when he comes out at that point. And I've seen a lot of fans of other clubs quite jealous at the fact that they got their star man coming out and being so openly emphatic, if you like, about the way that he's saying that he wants to stay. Alexander Isak did that earlier in the summer, and I commented on that. It's the way that they're saying that they're happy, how they are giving credence to things that people might often think, no, it doesn't matter, like family being happy and settled in the area. People like to think that sort of thing doesn't matter when a big club comes along. Manchester City are very interested, but they're apparently struggling to find a deal without selling the player first. They value him at 80 million. I still think, as I've said all along, there would be a decision for him to make if that came to the table. But the fact that he keeps talking about being happy at Newcastle, lots of players are quite coy on their future when there's a possibility of leaving. There's nothing coy about what Bruno Guimaraes said in that post. The fact that he's looking forward to playing for the club again, he loves the club, so emotional, and he's really bought into Newcastle. I've said this before, I've said this on the True Faith podcast as well. There aren't many people who commit to a club at all the way Bruno has to Newcastle, whether they're from the area, whether they're from the country, or whether they're from abroad. Bruno's come from a different country and bought into this club in a way that I don't think many other players have, and that can't be underestimated. They're going to vote on the leadership group replacement for Matt Ritchie in the coming weeks, and I think that Bruno's going to have a really good possibility of being involved. Nick Pope's another one who could be as well, but I think Bruno is showing exactly why he is such a leader and such a big part of Newcastle's future. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode. Please like, share and subscribe as I'm trying to get 600 subscribers now. That's the next target, but also another live stream coming on Wednesday. Let's get into the comments to let me know what you think, but also I'd love some questions for that live stream, some ideas of what to talk about. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much for joining me on this video. I'll be back on Wednesday for that live stream, and I'll see you then. Cheers.